Hey there, 8th graders, and welcome to today's Explainer. Get ready because we are about to uncover how the very dirt, water, and weather beneath our feet literally shaped American history. We're going to look at the foundations of American settlement through a pretty unique lens today. We'll be combining the physical, rugged landscape of early America with a really powerful sense of grace and responsibility. So, here's our game plan for today's lesson. We're going to cover how geography shapes our lives, why waterways were basically America's first highways, and the huge impact of mountains, resources, and climate. Then, we'll shift our perspective to view the land as a gift, and finally, we'll tie the whole shebang together by looking at education with morality. All right, let's jump right into Section 1. Geography shapes our lives. Okay, let's dive into this. We're actually going to ground our entire lesson today in a very specific biblical worldview, and it's captured perfectly in Psalm 16, verse 6. It says, "The boundary lines have fallen for me in pleasant places. Surely I have a delightful inheritance." You know, when we look at the land this way, as a beautiful, delightful inheritance that was given to us, it completely changes how we study history. It makes the mountains and rivers not just, rocks and dirt, but a purposeful gift. And that brings us directly to a core idea. Geography is an active player in our story. Where people actually choose to live depends heavily on the land, the water, and the climate. Understanding these geographic patterns is absolutely crucial for figuring out the big mysteries of history. Like, why did certain areas become incredibly wealthy trade centers while others stayed as quiet, rural farming communities? From the fertile river valleys to the rugged mountain ranges, the natural environment basically dictated where early communities formed, how they survived those brutal first winters, and ultimately, what kind of culture they built. Moving on to Section 2, waterways, which were really America's first highways. I want you to imagine, just for a second, that it's the 1600s. You're an early settler, you just arrived in a vast new land. You don't have trains, there are zero paved roads, and you certainly don't have cars. So what is the absolute easiest, fastest way to travel, move your heavy supplies, and survive? You look for water. Notice the distinct advantages between two totally different types of regions here. On one hand, we have the coastal advantage. Cities like Boston, New York, and Charleston just exploded in growth. And why? Because their deep, safe harbors encouraged fishing and incredible trade. These coastal cities became super wealthy hubs because they could easily ship goods back and forth across the ocean to Europe. But contrast that with the interior river settlements, places along the Mississippi, the James, and the Delaware rivers. These waterways provided direct access inland. They were absolutely vital for connecting rural farms to those bustling markets, allowing crops and supplies to just flow effortlessly across really long distances. All right, let's look inland and upward with Section 3, mountains, resources, and climate. Now, what's really interesting here is how we can see the actors of our geographic story clearly categorized. Think of them as characters dictating the plot of American settlement. The Atlantic coastline played the role of the wealthy trade hub. But look at the mountains, specifically the Appalachian Mountains. They weren't just pretty scenery for the settlers. They acted as a massive, intimidating physical barrier that actively slowed down westward migration for years, until transportation technology finally improved. On the flip side, look at the plains, like the Ohio River Valley and the Midwest. The abundant, rich farmland acted like a giant magnet, creating a massive population pull for settlers who were eager to grow abundant crops. And climate played just as big a role as the physical landforms. Picture a freezing, bustling northern harbor in the dead of winter. Folks are chopping wood, building sturdy ships, and focusing really heavily on industry and trade just to survive those cooler temperatures. Now, contrast that image with a vast, warm, sun-drenched southern region. Because of the long, warm growing seasons and the incredibly fertile soil, those areas naturally transformed into massive agricultural powerhouses. The climate didn't just dictate what kind of coat you wore, it determined the entire economic engine of the region. Let's recap the big takeaways here. And hey, 8th graders, pay close attention because these points directly answer some of your homework questions. So, why did early settlers choose coastal areas? Because they offered safe harbors for ships and international trade. How did the Appalachian Mountains affect early settlement? Well, they acted as a massive wall, a literal barrier slowing down westward movement. Why did river valleys encourage population growth? Because they allowed crops to flow to markets easily. Which climate factors supported farming in the South? The warm, fertile climates for sure. And finally, when you add all these geographic factors up, they created entirely different local economies. which is exactly how geography creates entirely distinct cultures between different regions. See, you're already acing the homework. Let's shift gears from history to personal responsibility in Section 4, Land as a Gift. So the crucial point here is understanding this one concept, stewardship. But what does that actually mean for an 8th grader today? Well, if we believe that the boundary lines have fallen for us in pleasant places, like we read earlier, that means we've been handed a gift. And receiving a gift means we have a duty to care for it responsibly. Stewardship means using our land, our places, and our resources wisely. It means operating with deep gratitude, fairness, and a profound respect for both the people around us and the creation we live in. I want to just pause for a second and throw this reflection question directly to you. How can communities use the land and resources around them in ways that honor God and help others? Think about your own neighborhood, your own city. When you look at the geography around you, how can your community's choices reflect fairness and stewardship? I really want you to try and bridge that gap between the historical choices made back in the 1600s and the choices your community is making today. Which brings us to our final stop, Section 5, Education with Morality. Let's see how this entire philosophy builds across 3 key steps. Step 1. Realize that education without morality actually hurts. Honestly, what is the point of knowing all about coastal advantages and river valleys if we don't know how to treat each other fairly? Step 2. Understand that just being smart or highly educated doesn't automatically prevent you from making bad choices that hurt yourself or your community. We absolutely need a moral compass. And step 3, embrace Romans chapter 8, verses 6 and 7, which promises peace of mind to everyone who keeps their mind spiritual. It's all about taking this incredible geographic and historical knowledge and actively pairing it with a strong biblical foundation. So, I'm going to leave you with this final provocative thought to chew on today. Will you choose to just be educated, to simply memorize facts about mountains and rivers to pass a test? Or will you use your knowledge of this delightful inheritance to make moral choices that bring real peace to your life and to your community? The choice is entirely up to you. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, 8th graders. Now go out there and be great stewards of your knowledge.